Welcome everyone to our 2025 Mass Power Forward Priorities webinar. We are going to get started in just a moment. In the meantime, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We have a little prompt for folks to answer, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. So please share your name, pronouns, town, and organization in the chat, and we will get rolling shortly. And I'm Dan with 350 Mass. I'm going to remove any AI note takers. So welcome everyone. Welcome, welcome. I already have 60 people on the call. Oh my God. The energy is here. Thank you, Eileen, for being our first person to introduce himself.
I thought you said what we were bringing, not what brought us here, but always hope for action, right?
Exactly. All right, co-facilitators, is the audio working now or not quite? All right, that's okay. We'll be musicless tonight.
Dang.
Always a shame, but sometimes the tech just doesn't quite participate the way we want to. Welcome everyone. We're going to get started in just a moment. For those who just arrived, please introduce yourself in the chat and share your name, pronouns, town, and organization. Thank you so much for joining us. We're at 70 people and growing quickly. I think we might hit 80 or 90 tonight, which is way, way over our goals. So thank you all so much for joining us. Beautiful. While folks are filtering in, I'm going to start introducing myself and our wonderful facilitation team tonight. I'm Dan. I'm the legislative manager with 350 Mass and a co-facilitator of the Mass Power Forward Coalition, which all of you lovely people are members of, just by virtue of being here. And I help facilitate that coalition with Jess Nahigian from the Sierra Club and Claire Carl from Universalist Unitarian Mass Action, who unfortunately can't join us tonight. And I'm joined by a couple wonderful co-facilitators who I'll give a chance to introduce themselves. Naya, you want to start us off?
Yeah, hi. I'm Naya Tanarowitz. I use she, her, or they, them pronouns. I am part of the Mass Power Forward planning team representing Climate Action Now Western Mass. I live in Springfield, and I'm also one of the leaders of the Springfield Climate Justice Coalition. And as such, I'm very heavily involved in the campaign to halt gas system expansions and stop that resource pipeline.
Thank you so much, Naya. Emma?
Hi, everybody. Emma Weiss. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the climate justice organizer at Clean Water Action and represent Clean Water Action on the Mass Power Forward Planning Committee. And I'll be talking about the air quality campaign tonight.
Thank you so much, Emma. Rachel?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Boyce. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Climate Justice and Resilience Manager for the Better Future Project and am a co-lead on the Make Polluters Pay campaign, which I'll be talking about tonight with Dan Zakin.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Jess?
Hey everyone, I'm Jess Nahigian. I use she and they pronouns, and I am the Deputy Director at the Sierra Club Massachusetts chapter.
Awesome. Thank you, Jess. And then our fantastic tech support, Evan.
Hey all, my name is Evan Bell. You see him, pronouns. I'm the Director of Organizing with 350 Mass, and tonight I'm in the background helping out with tech. If you have any troubles, feel free to directly chat me using the chat feature in the Zoom.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Evan. And before we get into our presentations tonight, a little bit of housekeeping and information. Please ask questions either with the chat or by raising your Zoom hand when we invite questions. You can do that with the React button at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that, there will be a button that will allow you to raise your hand. Please stay unmuted. Sorry, please stay muted until you are called upon to ask questions. And if you have any tech trouble, as Evan mentioned, please reach out to Evan. We're going to start with some education tonight on our priority bills that were chosen by our member organizations of Mass Power Forward. We're going to have some breakout rooms to discuss the presentations and talk about what this means for your communities. And then we will take action together and contact our legislators to urge them to co-sponsor these bills. So with that, Evan, are you ready to share your screen?
Going right up.
Awesome, thank you. Welcome, everyone. We are Mass Power Forward. Next slide. We are over 200 environmental leaders, community development organizations, clean energy businesses, faith groups, neighborhood, health, and safety advocates, and so much more, fighting for a just, clean energy future. Next slide. And we operate in deep solidarity with our frontline partners, including the Springfield Climate Justice Coalition, ACE, Green Roots, and so many more great organizations around the state that represent communities that are going to be impacted first and worst by the climate crisis. And with that little introduction, I'm going to pass it off to Emma to talk about one of our frontline campaigns, the air quality campaign.
Hi, everybody. I know I just introduced myself, but I'm Emma Weiss. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the climate justice organizer at Clean Water Action. I'm here talking to y'all today on behalf of the Massachusetts Environmental Justice Legislative Table, where I'll be sharing a little bit about the Better Air Quality for Environmental Justice campaign to get us all excited and to highlight the first opportunities that are coming up for engagement. So next slide, please. The Massachusetts Environmental Justice Table is convened by a multitude of environmental justice community and frontline organizations, some of which are ACE, Green Roots, NICOB, CSJ, and Arise Springfield, and they're supported by allied organizations like Clean Water Action, Sierra Club, ELM, UCS, Conservation Law Foundation, UMass Action, and many more. And one of the really greatest strengths of this campaign is the level of connection between the convening organizations and the communities that this campaign strives to serve. This space in this table is a space that is deeply trusted by environmental justice community members, which really allows the campaign to have deep roots and be tailored to serve their needs directly. Next slide, please. This campaign serves to address the fact that BIPOC residents of Massachusetts face up to 30% higher rates of exposure to poor air quality, especially particulate matter and particulate matter 2.5. This discrepancy is the result of intentional transportation and land use designations that are designed to protect white communities from pollution and burden Black and Brown communities with a disproportionate amount of pollution. PM 2.5 exposure leads to severe health complications, making poor air quality in environmental justice neighborhoods not only an environmental crisis, but a public health crisis. Environmental justice communities already experiencing poor outdoor air quality are then more likely to suffer the consequences of indoor air pollution from mold and other pollutants that are all too prominent, especially in multifamily housing, public schools, and other high-risk buildings. Next slide, please. So getting to the legislation that anchors this campaign, the first bill highlighted by this campaign is in the House 1924 and in the Senate 1086, formally named an act to ensure cleaner air for communities overburdened by outdoor air pollution, fondly referred to as the Outdoor Air Quality Bill. This bill creates a technical advisory committee empowering community-based and environmental justice organizations to identify likely air pollution hotspots in the Commonwealth and provide recommendations for the installation of air filters in nearby buildings. It also requires DEP or Department of Environmental Protection to set up or expand air monitoring in identified pollution hotspots to establish a baseline of air pollution and set pretty impressive targets for air pollution reduction within the next 10 years. And for anybody that was sort of in this space last year, you might remember that this bill and the indoor air quality bill were sort of combined into one. For this go around, they have been separated with the hope that they will end up in committees that are more tailored to their actual contents and the different in their contents. So that's just an element that we think might really help push this campaign a little bit further this session. So next slide, please. The next bill we're focusing on in the House is 2787 and the Senate 2074, an act to ensure cleaner air for communities overburdened by indoor air pollution, affectionately called the Indoor Air Quality Bill. This bill would create a task force to develop a statutory and regulatory framework to identify, monitor, and remediate indoor air pollution and indoor mold contamination in schools, long-term care facilities, correctional facilities, early childhood education facilities, public housing, and privately owned residential buildings. It also directs the Department of Public Health and Department of Environmental Protection to promulgate indoor air quality monitoring, regulations, and procedures. So those are sort of the gist of what both bills cover, but we are sort of rooting for them in one cohesive campaign. Next slide, please. So I want to just share a little bit of how you can support this campaign right now. Obviously, if you represent an organization, please include these bills as part of your co-sponsorship request. And individuals should contact their legislators and ask them to co-sponsor and help shepherd these bills throughout the process, which I believe we'll be doing a little bit at the end of this call. We will be releasing a fact sheet with some graphics and statistics in the next week or so. So please stay tuned for the release of that. And when you get it, distribute it to your memberships, your friends, and your family. We will also be hosting a legislative briefing the last week of March in partnership with the Massachusetts Association of Community Development Corporations, or MACDC. So look out for that invitation and be sure to show up in support. We anticipate hearings to take place later in the fall, so that will include a call to action, but that will be at a later date. But stay in our network so we can contact you when it is time to show up for those hearings. And next slide, please. Another big event that anchors this campaign that's coming up really soon is World Asthma Day, which usually takes place on or around May 6th, which is the World Asthma Day holiday. And this is a really important event that serves to connect sort of the aloof legislative process with the communities that these bills are intended to serve. In the past, we've gathered a speaker panel consisting of legislators, youth leaders, organizers, and community members to share out regarding the importance of air quality for all and good air quality, no matter your zip code, which has been a really awesome and awe-inspiring experience. This event does a great job of really centering this campaign in community and place-based action. And part of the reason that's possible is because of the deep ties that some of our frontline organizations have with these communities. And the 2025 steering committee for this event has begun planning for this year. So if you are interested in participating or you want to know anything more about the planning process or how to get involved before sort of our call for sponsorships and media guide comes out, you can contact me directly. And that is all I have. The next slide is just saying it's time for questions and answers.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emma. That was a great presentation. If there are any questions for Emma, please raise your Zoom hand and I'll call on you, or put your question in the chat. Yeah, John Grossman, the quick draw.
Thanks for the presentation there. On the indoor bill, does it require the mold to be remediated And who is required to do that? Are municipalities or is the state? And how is that funded? If it is required.
So unfortunately, we're having to start a little bit farther back than requiring the immediate remediation of mold because we don't even have sort of the framework set up to identify where there is mold in buildings and whose responsibility it should be when it is and who should have to identify it. So I think and I hope that this will be part of a larger push to get funding for immediate mold remediation in communities, but we are having to start a little bit further back just because of the lack of existing regulatory
Yeah, no, I appreciate
framework
that.
around.
That wasn't a criticism, just trying to understand it. So it doesn't require the mediation at this point. It's just a
No, yeah,
policy.
no, absolutely. I'm sorry. I didn't take your question as a
Yeah.
criticism. I know it's like a bummer. We're like, I wish we could just say
I know.
everyone has to go in right now and get it all out. And that's the bill. But unfortunately, we're dealing with a system that is a little farther behind than we might prefer at this point.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emma. Unfortunately, we don't have time for another question live, but if folks want to put questions in the chat, Emma would be very happy. I'm happy to volunteer, Emma, to answer them in the chat.
And that's the correct volunteering. I will be happy to answer. And you can also message me privately with the chat function.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emma. I'm really excited to be fighting for clean air over the next 2 years. Next up, we have the new iteration of the Halt on Gas campaign, the Protecting People from Utility Profiteering, led by Naya and Jess. And Evan, would you mind putting those slides back up? Thank you so much.
All right. So this is anchored by a whole coalition of groups, including the Springfield Climate Justice Coalition, which kind of called it to action to begin with, and is supported by the Sierra Club Massachusetts, Plan for the Northeast, Food and Water Watch, Climate Action Now Western Mass, UU Mass Action, Mothers Out Front MA, and Canson Residents for a Sustainable, Equitable Future. And it may grow. So we kind of have a whole coalition to anchor it. Next slide. So for this session, we've diversified the campaign a little bit in response to all of the opposition and dreadfulness of coming up against the utilities and their amount of lobbying and propagandizing and all of that last session. So we've got two aspects of it, which are unified by the through line of protecting people and communities from predatory energy utilities. So the one side of it is stopping new gas system expansions. So that's both stopping new distribution pipelines, as well as stopping, new like gas fueled electricity generation plants. Basically saying we know that this fuel is not good for our planet. It's not good for our people. We need to stop building more of it. And the other side is to try and counter the amount of power and control and corruption that is going on between the energy utilities and our government and leadership. So we have another bill that we're pushing for that pushes for increased energy utility accountability. Next slide. I'll tell you about the updated Halt on Gas campaign. So it's formally an act preventing gas expansion to protect climate, community health, and safety. Next slide. So we already know a few things about gas. One is that it increases air pollution and makes us sick. The second is that it is a dangerous and volatile fuel to use and increases the risk of fires and explosions, as well as toxic leaks. And the third is that it is a potent greenhouse gas and is contributing to the greenhouse gas effect and climate change. Next slide. And we also know that it's a major polluter in Massachusetts. In 2020, natural gas power plants emitted 44% of Massachusetts' total emissions, and it makes up the vast majority of the emissions that come from residential homes as well. So we have a big task ahead of us to reduce our state emissions as we need to meet our climate goals, as well as to make our communities healthier and safer and protect our planet. Next slide. But the gas utilities are not on the same page as us for that. They are still pushing to expand the gas system, both in distribution and in generation. We are fighting the proposed Eversource gas pipeline that would run from Longmeadow into Springfield, would cost over $65 million that would be paid by ratepayers at this time when we are already paying a lot of money to this system that we need to get off of. And they even got a, gas power plant expansion approved in Eastern Mass as well. So clearly, the utilities are not just going to get on board with the energy transition just because, it is required for our collective survival. Next slide. So our updated halt on gas bill would prevent the approval of new gas system expansions within 5 miles of EJ communities, based on a precedent of having passed the biomass bill a couple legislative sessions ago, using that language of protecting EJ communities, which are the most targeted for polluting projects like this, and therefore starting the protection for those most vulnerable, and then it will spread from there. So this would save ratepayers money by not funding new unnecessary gas expansion projects. It would protect polluted communities by preventing even more polluting projects from being sited here. It would help us meet our climate emission reduction mandates, and we've added language to ensure a just transition for any gas workers who are impacted by the transition. Although this bill is just focused on not doing new expansion projects, not on decommissioning the gas system. We're not touching that. It's just saying, hey, we need to stop and not do more of this. All right, next slide. I'll pass it over to Jess to talk about the other bill that we're pushing for.
Yeah, so in addition to all of the pollution that these expanded gas projects bring, they also take money, and they take ratepayer money. And it turns out there are a lot of ways that we are getting screwed over right now by the utilities. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happening right now with our energy bills and how we can respond in this moment, because this moment we're in is very much related to this campaign. Next slide. Okay, so Naya already mentioned, right? Our biggest opponents are the utilities, and they are powerful. As you can see, this study found that the utilities outspent environmentalists in the legislature 3.5 to 1. And the biggest spenders there are the utilities themselves. And I should say that was of all fossil fuels, that is the utilities. They were the biggest ones of all fossil fuel spenders. Next slide. So not all of this spending is coming from our rates, but a lot of it is coming from our rates. Our laws are really fuzzy right now, and they lack transparency and enforcement around what utilities can and can't put into our rates. So there was a recent report from the Energy and Policy Institute that found that the utilities have been recovering and reporting that they recover. This is just what we know about, okay? Institutional advertising, excessive expenses, perks, board member expenses, all sorts of things that are not required to provide safe, reliable energy service. And we don't have strong enough protections in Massachusetts stopping utilities from charging us for these. Next slide. So one solution is to improve our laws, and this is already starting to happen all over the country. In just the past year, I think 5 states have already passed this type of legislation to prevent utilities from charging us for these expenses. That includes Maine and Connecticut, both of whom share utilities with Massachusetts, and you can see some of the savings that ratepayers have had under these new laws here. Next slide. So the bill that we're supporting would prevent the recovery of all political influence and advocacy and other inappropriate expenses like goodwill branding. They're a monopoly. They don't need to sell us on how great they are. We don't have to pay them to sell us on how great they are, right? It would close loopholes that have allowed this kind of spending to continue even under our current shaky laws. And it would increase transparency. So again, I said this is only what we know about. This would require that they report in much finer detail how they're spending our money so that we can ensure it's not going toward these things. And it would actually create real penalties on them if they try to stick us with these expenses. Next slide. So really the bottom line is here, we have for-profit utility corporations in Massachusetts, and they are wasting our money, and they are wasting our money on unnecessary infrastructure, and they're wasting our money, I should say, on political activity and expenses not related to what they're supposed to be doing. So we need to fight back. Next slide.
So, Jess, am I
go
doing
ahead.
these or are you?
I was going to do this. Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
So right now we're actually at a turning point because prices are really, really high in Massachusetts. I don't know about if you all have gotten utility bills lately. I have. They're eye-popping. And people are talking about this. People are noticing. And it is not just, it's not normal. And people recognize that. There are a lot of expenses here that are rolled up into what's called our distribution charge, our delivery charge. And gas companies and utility companies are blaming our energy efficiency policies in Massachusetts. And they're taking this opportunity to go after some of the programs that we know work to save people money and to save energy. But here's what they're not telling you. Next slide. Right. So they're not telling us that they're misusing our funds with all of this political and advertising spending. They're not telling us that they make 10% return on every piece of infrastructure they put in the ground, which is ridiculous. If I could get a bank to give me a 10% return, I would put all my money in that bank, right? And they're not telling us that their unnecessary spending on this infrastructure is driving up our bills. Next slide. So we need to spread the word because this narrative is not out there, and it's really important that people know that this is what's really going on. And so we're asking folks to ask your legislators to co-sponsor these bills, and also to spread the word about this to your friends and family and to social media. There have been groups that have popped up in the last week that are railing against these bills. Totally understandable, totally justified. And without an alternative, they're starting to turn on our clean energy programs. And that's not the reason that these bills are going up. So I'm going to drop an action guide into the chat on a couple of different ways that you can engage. And I really hope that you will support the campaign.
I will also be making a set of social media infographics that you can share on social media to counter the utility propaganda that it's mass save that is driving our costs up, and not the fact that their CEO is in the top 10 highest paid energy CEOs in the country, or, that they literally have increased their distribution gas delivery rates between 30 to 40% in just the last few months. So I'm going to be finishing those by the end of the weekend and putting them in the toolkit. So we've got some stuff for you guys to get started with, and then there will be even more resources for you to pull on by the end of the weekend.
The last piece I want to mention is that taking care of workers is extremely important, and that is why the new bill includes language that ensures a just transition written by folks in the labor movement that ensures a just transition for any worker that may potentially be displaced by not building new infrastructure. Last piece.
Thank you so much, Jess and Naya. It is happening right now. I am not looking forward to paying my energy bill, and we need to make sure people know where to point the finger. Thank you so much for all your work on this campaign. We're a little bit behind, so we only have time for just one question if folks want to raise their digital hand, and then there will be more time for questions in the chat. Cool. Okay. I guess folks are up to date, up to speed. Remember, there will be time to answer questions in the chat. But now our third and final campaign, Make Polluters Pay. Rachel, floor is yours.
Thanks, Dan. All right, good evening. I'll reintroduce myself. My name is Rachel Boyce. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Climate Justice and Resilience Manager for the Better Future Project. I'm a co-lead on the Make Polluters Pay campaign alongside Dan. We're very honored to have Make Polluters Pay or an act establishing a climate change superfund as a priority campaign for Mass Power Forward, and are delighted to be here tonight to kick off our campaign. Next slide, please. So, what is this campaign fighting for? We're fighting for polluter accountability for the loss and damages inflicted on Massachusetts communities and to ensure no one is left behind in our state's climate resilient transition. Fossil fuel companies have knowingly endangered our world for decades, putting our lives and livelihoods at risk while raking in billions of dollars in profits. It's time to make them pay their fair share for the damage they've knowingly caused. Next slide, please. The Make Polluters Pay movement is growing. As of the beginning of 2025, 33 states and municipalities have brought lawsuits against big oil for climate damages. Additionally, 7 states have filed legislation to create a climate superfund, with Vermont and New York successfully making their climate superfunds law in 2024. Next slide, please. Despite the worries of some nervous legislators here in Massachusetts, superfunds are actually not a novel concept. The Climate Superfund model is grounded in U.S. legal precedent. Established by Congress in 1980, this law operates on the polluters pay principle and has been used to gain restitution from polluters for communities at 1,340 Superfund sites around the country, with 31 of those sites here in Massachusetts. This law is the nation's largest environmental remediation program and a powerful precedent for the Climate Superfund model. Next slide, please. The Climate Superfund we've just filed in Massachusetts applies that same polluters pay principle of the U.S. Superfund law to historic greenhouse gas emissions in Massachusetts. The Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs will assess the total cost of climate-related damages inflicted on Massachusetts between 1995 and 2024. Once that estimate of damages is established, the Climate Superfund will require the largest fossil fuel extractors with ties to Massachusetts and with over 1 billion tons of carbon emissions to pay into the fund proportionate to their share of emissions between that same period, 1995 to 2024. Next slide, please. So where would all that money go? This is not an exhaustive list, but some possibilities for investment are public infrastructure projects, nature-based solutions to mitigate heat, flooding, and other impacts of climate change, building weatherization, preventative health care programs, medical care to treat climate change-related conditions, and other projects as advised by relevant stakeholders, including frontline communities and labor organizations. Additionally, 40% of these fees will be prioritized for environmental justice communities. Next slide, please. So why does Massachusetts need a climate superfund? Well, the headlines, the stories, the pictures speak for themselves. Increased occurrence of wildfires within the state and worsening air quality from wildfires around the country, increased occurrences of heat stroke and other heat-related illness, increased flooding, receding shorelines, loss of industry, increased destruction of public infrastructure. The list goes on and on. Next slide, please. A recent report by the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston found that between 1990 and 2019, every time the average temperature increased 1 degree in Massachusetts, just 1 degree, Massachusetts cities and towns spent 3.2% more on infrastructure maintenance, snow removal, cooling public buildings, and other weather response measures. The report estimates this could jump to 30% by the end of the century. Since 1995, Massachusetts has experienced 35 extreme weather disasters with damages totaling $10 billion, and this will only get worse. And what do we have to respond? Massachusetts municipalities have an average budget of $5,000 annually for disaster response. And according to Massachusetts Climate Chief Hoffer in her report on the state's response to climate change, the Commonwealth currently lacks a comprehensive plan to fund necessary projects to reduce the impacts of climate change on Massachusetts communities. And then, can we rely on the federal government, which is laughable, with a national climate policy of drill, baby, drill, and the daily assault on federal agencies meant to bolster the state's disaster response efforts? The new administration is emboldening the fossil fuel industry and making it very clear that states are on their own. Next slide, please. So how do we win? I'm going to first start with the why. Why are we going to win this campaign? This is the second time around for the Make Polluters Pay bill in Massachusetts, and it is very different this go around. We have a stronger bill, we have a stronger coalition, and we're bolstered by the victories of our neighbors in Vermont and New York. Massachusetts has the historic opportunity to join them in passing the third climate superfund in the nation. So how are we going to do it? Next slide, please. Through this incredible coalition, we've been joined by organizations across the state that believe in the potential of a climate superfund for their communities and are ready to fight for our resilience. Next slide, please. This is how we're going to get this passed. Showing up tonight is step one. One of tonight's actions is to reach out to your legislator, ask them to co-sponsor the climate superfund bill. If you have not already done so, join our coalition. Dan or I can speak directly to your membership, but we need more people in this fight. Join us for our in-person campaign kickoff. It's on March 16th. The location has not been decided, has not been finalized yet, but it will be in the Boston area. In March, we'll also be relaunching our online petition demanding the governor and House leadership support the climate superfund. Sign our petition, send it to your networks. In April, we'll hold a joint legislative briefing with other climate funding campaigns, and then we'll be holding an educational webinar on passing a municipal resolution in your town or city. Passing a municipal resolution is a powerful signal between your community and the State House that Massachusetts residents support this bill. And in late spring and all through the summer and fall, join us for in-person events across the state, including community walks, envisioning sessions, and direct actions. There are so many ways for you to get involved in this fight, so please join us. Thanks for listening. I'll pass it back to you, Tim.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I don't know about you, but I'm ready to make polluters pay. Going to take just a few questions, and then we'll talk a bit about our action tonight and have some space for discussion. So, Jonathan, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a detail about the public infrastructure that was on the top of the list of where the money would go. Does that include mass transit, given that car pollution is, like, I think last I heard it, is about 60% of all greenhouse gases in the state, so it's a huge factor. And mass and other modes of mobility, are those part of that?
So your
Jonathan,
audio's oh, Rachel, after you.
you were cutting in and out, but I just want to clarify. You're asking if public transportation projects would be part of the public infrastructure. I think we've lost you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Public transportation is especially bolstering public transportation against the impacts of climate change, such as the issues that we've seen in Boston with rails on very hot days and also flooding that would be considered part of public infrastructure projects.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for one more from Robert, and then we will get into the next phase of our webinar.
Yeah, thank you very much. The question I have is, what is the impact of this going to be on utility bills? Because I imagine National Grid and Eversource are both kind of big polluters here in Massachusetts. And my legislature is going to ask, first question is, what's this going to do to my people's power bills?
That's a great question, Robert. So this bill is not targeting Eversource or National Grid. It's targeting top polluters that directly engage in the business of extracting and burning fossil fuels. And then also, this is not a carbon tax. This is for historic emissions. So it would actually be illegal for companies to build this fee into their current cost of production and then passing that fee on to the consumer.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel. And thank you, Robert, for your question. So our next phase for tonight, we are going to send all 80 of you off into some breakout rooms and give you a chance to talk about what these campaigns mean to your community and how you'll talk to your legislators about them. And I know some folks are a bit scared by breakout rooms and will drop off the moment that you say that's what's happening. So I'm going to put those prompts in our chat as well as the action network, which is how you can take action with us tonight. We're going to have 7-minute breakout rooms, come back and talk a bit, and then take action together. Awesome. Make sure to introduce yourselves also. A lot of people don't know each other on this call. Awesome. And Tennille, Godfrey, and Mary, just give me one moment and I'll put you in rooms. And Godfrey, good to see you. It's been a while.
Hear that. Happy to see you too.
Godfrey, gonna put you in room 20. Oop, okay, this is what happens when people bail. We're gonna have some people solo in their rooms. Let me fix that. So we dropped by 10 the moment I said anything about breakout rooms.
Can you get me?
Yep, on it right now. Sorry about that, Connie. Okay, good job, team.
Dan, can you
Yeah,
throw
can you
me
hear me?
back in my room? I
You
don't know
should
where
have an invite. Do you see?
No, because I had my cursor got me off the whole thing, and I
All
had to get.
good. What about now? Okay,
Hi,
and there she
there's
is.
nobody responding in my breakout room, so could I go to another one, please?
Happy to. That's unfortunate. Maybe bigger breakout rooms would be better so that people can hide in the corners.
Good job, Dan.
Thank you. Good job, all of you. Right back at you. We dropped from 80 down to 60 once we went into breakout rooms.
I saw like 8 people drop off before you even finished your sentence and said, I'm putting the action link in the chat. They literally heard the word and bailed out like a bomb was about to go off.
Yeah, maybe a good lesson. Something to debrief. Also, while folks are in the rooms, are folks okay staying on about 10 minutes after to just do a quick debrief after this call? Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. We can keep it quick. I don't want to
Yep.
keep anyone on too late, but awesome. I hope people are actually able to have conversations. It's weird to have ghost rooms out there.
It's very normal for large meetings. We do small breakouts in our climate action now meetings very regularly, and this is just how it goes. There's always shifting around. There's always, I was in a room, but no one else was there. Or I was in the room, but the other person wasn't responding, and then you shuffle them around. Yet there's nothing you could have done that would have prevented that. Like, this is just how it works with small breakouts and large groups. So you're doing a really great job.
Thank you. The only fix is to get people in a room in person. It's a bit harder to pretend you're not there.
Yeah, true. There's sometimes it's things like, their audio is glitched out or their mic is broken or whatever.
Totally. That is a much more gracious interpretation. Evan, did you want to jump in?
I'm just gonna step away for 1 minute to go feed my dog, but I'll be back before the end of the breakouts.
Beautiful. And you're off the hook tech-wise for the rest of the Zoom.
Okay,
Like muting
cool.
is appreciated, but there's no screen sharing needed from you.
Nice. Okay, sounds good. Let me know if there's other ways to hop in.
Will do. Okay. Which campaign are you guys excited to work on?
I mean, I'm of course excited about Make Polluters Pay, but the utility, I'm really excited about the utility campaign. I used to do like mass save training programs, and it was just like astonishing of the lack of transparency with utilities, and then also the lack of access to those weatherization services, and not comprehensive enough. And then also just personal investment. Yeah, my gas bill jumped from it's like 150 to 380 for January. I was shocked. I was like convinced that it must have been a mistake, and then I saw Healy's letter and just absurd.
Healy's letter. Please, department that I am in charge of, do something.
Yeah,
I mean,
Sorry.
no. I read that and I was like, so what does this actually do? Is it just like she's just trying to get off of the hook and make it look like she's doing something?
well, I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
Rachel, if you
something
want to write a blog post about it, we'd love to have it on our blog.
yeah, other 350 groups are working on utilities, like basically running campaigns like this. We were like sort of finding ways to support, and it's just really cool to see how this campaign has progressed, and it's like super in line with a lot of the stuff a lot of our partners are doing. So I think we'll obviously be supporting the legislation, joining the actions and stuff, but um, as the campaigns develop, I would love to, pull in like, hey, and here's what San Diego's doing, and we can find some of these national uh, stories to tell. I think that like the 350 groups are excited to find these threads.
I love that. That's one of my favorite things is building the connections and seeing the like similar movements and actions and ways in which it all interconnects of like, throughout the state, but also throughout the country. We're all working towards the same stuff and dealing with similar problems. I love seeing those things connect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey,
I
team,
mean,
I'm
I'm
going to
excited
close
about
the breakout
Polluters Pay.
rooms and give them the 30-second timer.
I'm excited about Polluters Pay. Our volunteers are really excited about Polluters Pay.
Woo!
We love to hear that. Also, I'm going to share my screen in a moment to walk folks through the action network after we do the questions. If folks can keep up the chat responses, that'd be really helpful. Oh my God. Sorry, you have to actually press the close all rooms button to start the timer. That was really silly on my part. Okay. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Good to have y'all here.
This is that was
Good
too
to have
short.
Watertown in the room. Welcome back, everyone. So, how'd it go? I'd love to hear maybe one or two folks raise their Zoom hand and share something they spoke about in their breakout room. Anyone feeling brave? Awesome. I am our first taker.
At the end of our time, we found a really, really deep feeling of agreement over it being the time for the movement, not the individual groups. It's about the groups coming together and building the movement. I'll kick it off with that.
Beautiful. Thank you. Jonathan, coming back for more?
Yeah, just our group was talking about it. I was pretty excited about joining in and contacted legislatures and continue that work and hassling them, all that stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much. John?
Yeah, thank you. In Brookline, we are about to file a resolution for the May Brookline Town Meeting session. And so far, we have 13 co-petitioners and 30 other people who'd like to co-petition with us, which is just getting the thing started. So we think we can make this a very huge educational campaign involving, well, really all of the politically active people in the town of Brookline, centered on Brookline Town Meeting.
That's
So it's going
awesome.
to be
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right, one more, Jordan, and then we'll get into action.
Nice to see you, Dan. Hey, everyone. I got to connect with some folks from Watertown and told them that we are working in Boston on a hearing on banning styrofoam. So we're going to work together. Got an email and going to work on that together. So that's fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jordan. So I'm now going to share my screen and walk y'all through the action network that we have set up for tonight. Can folks see this okay? Awesome. So this is Action Network. This is the two-click software that we have set up. And this link is in the chat, and I'll put it back in the chat in just a moment. But you come to this screen, there's information around our priority bills that you heard about tonight. And on the right, I'm logged in, so I don't have to put in my address. There'll be a prompt to put in your information and then start writing. And this will take you to a pre-written letter to your legislators. Mine are going to Rep. Montano and Senator Miranda, asking them to co-sponsor the bills. There's a bit of an intro. There's a descriptor with the names of the bills and their numbers, and then a bit of rhetoric about why this is important. Definitely encourage folks to customize their letters. Definitely encourage folks to say, I live at this address. I am a constituent living in this specific place. I'm really worried about this, and share why this matters to you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we're actually all going to send these letters live on this Zoom right now after Sue asks her question.
Yeah, I have my two legislators, I would write to them very differently, but it looks like it's the same letter going to both, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so I'll write the letter blander than I would if it was more specific. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. And it's okay for this to be a first pass. The goal for tonight is to get our message out. And if you have personal relationships with your legislators, doing follow-up, having meetings with them, that's all going to be part of these campaigns. This is sort of the first broadside to say, we're here, we're a member of Mass Power Forward, and we are really excited to do it. Oop, did I have a issue with my link, Jess?
Oh, but the more you change
Yes, it
the
goes
letter and
directly to
personalize it, the more attention it'll get. So they
Absolutely. Wait, sorry, I'm going to mute you. Jess, was there an issue with the link?
Yeah, I was just saying use the link I just put in the chat. I think the other one is specific to you, Dan. So we don't want a lot of Dan Zaggin sending messages.
Yes, please do not have a million letters from me going to my reps. Thanks for catching that.
Next, we'll hear that Dan Zakin sent the most letters from the.
You got me there, Kathy. All right, folks. So go to Jess's link, not mine. And yeah, get writing. And we'll be here for a couple of minutes, then we'll come back in about 2 minutes to have some closing announcements and then send you on your way just at the stroke of 7. Awesome. I see Jordan said it was easy. Demi said I did this on Tuesday. That's great. I hadn't written the Action Network Tuesday, so I'm assuming you're talking about the co-sponsorship ask more broadly. Beautiful. And I also want to add, I know there are some folks on this call who are a bit more hesitant about what they send to their legislators. If you need time to read over the bills, read the fact sheets for the campaigns before you just fire off an email, that is very okay as well. We're still really excited to have you involved in these campaigns.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
So my state senator will not co-sponsor anything. He says he's in leadership and he refuses. So is there a different ask?
Yeah, I'm gonna mute you, Caroline, just because there seems to be a bit of feedback on my end at least. But if your legislator refuses to co-sponsor, I think it's still valid to make the ask and put pressure on them to do so. If they once again get back to you and say, I just don't do this, asking them to talk to the committee chair will be a great ask down the line. Our legislature is moving at a historically slow rate, and they still have not announced their committee chairs, so that information isn't public yet. But asking them more broadly to talk to their colleagues about why these bills are important to their district is a great step to take before we have committee chairs out. And if you're concerned about the glacial pace of our legislature, good. And just want to uplift something from David in the chat that if your legislator is in leadership, they're probably part of the problem with climate bills not moving. Very astutely put.
Dan, where do I find this letter in the chat?
So if you click on chat at the bottom of the screen,
Yeah.
there is a link from Jess that will
Okay.
put in again. And
with her initials, is that it? Is that how I identify it?
Yep, or Naya
I
just put it in the
shared
chat
it
as
in
well.
the chat again. It should be the newest message in the chat, just a link. You click on
And
that, that'll take you to it.
yep. And I'm going to mute you, Bill, give Larry the final word, and then I'll give just a closing bit, and then we will
final
send you
word.
off for
That's a
the
lot of
night.
pressure, Dan. Just a quick question. Do you prefer that we use the Action Network link to send these letters, or would it be okay to just copy text and send letters separately to my reps? I ask in part because my senator is sponsor of kind of bills, and it'll just sound awkward if I'm asking her to co-sponsor her own bill.
Yeah, no, totally. If you want to customize the letter, you're welcome to. If you want to copy and paste it into your email browser, you're welcome to. Action Network is great because there's a tracker that says how many people have written letters, and we're already at 35, which is fantastic. But feel free to customize. I know a lot of people on this call have personal relationships with their legislators. Do what feels right. The core thing is that you make the ask. So now we are just about at 7 o'clock. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. This is just the very beginning of these powerful campaigns to make polluters pay and stop gas system expansion and stop our utilities from meddling in our politics. And most importantly, to make sure that all of our communities across Massachusetts have clean air to breathe. Thank you so much for joining. We had a peak of 100 participants tonight, which is a pretty good place to start. And I'm so excited to keep building power and moving our legislature hand in hand with all of you over the next 2 years. Thank you so much and good night.
Thank you, Dan.